Clinton was finally asked about her campaign funding that unsubstantiated Trump dossier on The Daily Show. Now, it's good that Trevor Noah raised the question, but he should have asked the obvious follow-up when Clinton said the Oppo research had been approved by a campaign lawyer. Did she know about the dossier at the time? But when he asked about critics who said she should just go away, the former Democratic nominee went after a familiar culprit.
Some of it, I will say, is media guilt. You know, when they now have to face the way they covered this campaign and the fact that they didn't pay any attention to policies, they were so totally entranced by the reality TV element of it and the entertainment value of it that I'm told, and some members of the press have privately said to me, look, they missed it. They missed it. They thought I was going to win so they could beat up on me without consequence.
Right. First, her suggestion that some journalists regret beating up on her because they thought she'd win anyway suggests they adjust their coverage based on the outcome they want, which would be utter bias. But beyond that, yes, the media never do enough on issues. But Donald Trump drove the campaign dialogue in large measure because he did hundreds of interviews with journalists, including half a dozen with me, while Clinton did very few, even on sympathetic channels. CNN anchor Jake Tapper has accused Fox News and the Daily Caller of lying about something he said soon after the New York terror attack.
Jake Tapper, also from CNN, felt the need to remind viewers how beautiful the phrase Allah Akbar can be.
The Arabic chant, Allah Akbar, God is great, sometimes said under the most beautiful of circumstances, and too often we hear of it being said in moments like this.
Tapper has a point about context. It wasn't technically a lie since the clip was aired, but online, Fox News Insider ran only a partial quote in a headline labeling his comment as outrageous, when Tapper was simply suggesting the use of Allahu Akbar, God is great, was being perverted by terrorists. Fox has deleted a tweet promoting that article, and the Daily Caller has run a grudging correction. And White House Chief of Staff John Kelly got a lot of media blowback for this answer when Laura Ingraham asked about a Virginia church taking down plaques honoring George Washington and Robert E. Lee.
The lack of an ability to compromise led to the Civil War, and men and women of good faith on both sides made their stand where their conscience had them make their stand.
Now, I don't agree there could have been any compromise in a war that was fought over slavery, and it's fine for critics to argue that historical point. But some of the media insinuations that the general is defending slavery today are just absurd, as was CNN's April Ryan asking Sarah Huckabee Sanders whether President Trump believes slavery was wrong. Come on. Head on Media Buzz, a reprehensible attack on Laura Ingraham over her religion. But first, Bill Bennett on the media and the president and the cultural divide affecting press coverage of politics and much more. With President Trump drawing substantially negative media scrutiny this week, joining us now from North Carolina is Bill Bennett, the veteran author and government official, host of the Bill Bennett podcast on iTunes and a Fox News contributor. And Bill, you've served in White House and cabinet jobs in the Reagan and first Bush administration. So when you read these stories saying President Trump is publicly and improperly pressuring his attorney general to investigate Democrats, do these critics in the media have a point?
No, I don't think they have a real point, not a major point. But my reaction has been to echo Jimmy Carter, former President Carter. At no time in history has anybody been treated so badly by the press as Donald Trump. That was Jimmy Carter, and I think that's right. It's relentless. It's quite unbelievable. Now, the president needs to be careful what he says about Bob Mueller and the investigation and the Justice Department. But as one of your guests earlier, Ed Henry, I think it came out in a conversation, said, he seems to be being careful. He's talking more about the Justice Department and less about Bob Mueller, in light of the fact that I think they believe this thing may be coming to a close. But that won't stop the press from being who they are.
Well, since you raised the indictment of Paul Manafort and others by Bob Mueller, the pro-Trump spin has been this is all about Manafort's past business activities as a lobbyist. It doesn't have anything to do with the campaigns. Before he joined the campaign, it doesn't have anything to do with the White House. Is that true, or is it also true that when there's this kind of huge controversies, for example, the Iran-Contra scandal in the Reagan administration, is inevitably a distraction for those working for the president?
Well, of course it's a distraction. It's huge. And every time something happens, and it's blaring as headline news, they all have to drop what they're doing, go to the Oval Office, have a meeting. What do we do now? How do we respond? But you asked the question, Howard, and that's a great question. It's asked all the time. Is it true? I'm going to give you the answer everybody should give. I don't know. And neither does anybody else at this point, except maybe some of Bob Mueller and some of his associates. But we'll find out. I think there's reason to believe that this thing, as I said earlier, may be drawing to a close. And it looks at this point, given the indictments of Manafort and Gates and Papadopoulos, a very minor player, that it may indeed not reach the president. My guess, if I were a betting man, if I were still a betting man, is that it won't reach to the president.
Right. I don't know is a very underutilized answer on television because there's so much that we just speculate about. Now, Jimmy Carter absolutely said worst coverage he's ever seen of a modern president, the coverage that Trump gets. But because you work for George H.W. Bush and you're also on an advisory council for this president, I'll ask you about this new book, which George H.W. Bush, Bush 41, quoted as calling Trump a blowhard, said he voted for Hillary Clinton. George W. Bush also didn't vote for this president, had some negative comments. It's not fake news. This is what they said to the author. Your thoughts on that?
I think it was most inappropriate of the two presidents, both of whom I like very much. I revere George H.W. Bush. He was a wonderful boss, and I very much enjoyed serving him. But these guys shouldn't have done that. Look, but the simple answer is, where were they during Obama? For Pete's sakes, 8 years of Obama, in my view, taking down the country, certainly taking the country downhill. And we heard nothing because of this pledge of not to speak ill of former presidents. Right. One of the founders, Howie, wrote that when presidents leave office, they should disappear. They should go to Europe or Asia and not be ghosts haunting the incumbent. I think that's probably a very good idea. But speaking up here, it was just, I think, totally inappropriate and unfair given their silence on Obama, who was doing a lot more damage to the country.
All right. Given the deep divide now between, we see this every day, pro-Trump coverage, anti-Trump coverage, does this now go beyond the left-right ideological divide in this country, particularly when it comes to an issue like, for example, President Trump going after the NFL on anthem protests? Let's go a little deeper on this.
Well, actually, the NFL thing is very interesting, and his reaction to the truck murder in New York and some of the other things. He has a way of touching the nerves that these contours, these divides in American culture, in a way that excites both sides, positively and negatively. He's got an instinct. Somebody said the other day, it's Uncle Harry for president. Uncle Harry has finally become president. The guy who comes to Thanksgiving dinner and says, I'm going to tell you what's wrong with this country. And now he's president, and he's telling us, and I frankly like it. But it is a larger cultural divide, and that cultural divide, because Daniel Patrick Moynihan said famously, culture is more important than politics. And the culture at CNN, I used to work for CNN, I know others who used to work for CNN too, Howie, and the culture at Fox are very different places. But if you have a lot of journalists who were nurtured on the great story that I think inspires so many of them, not the night before Christmas or not the first Thanksgiving, but once upon a time there were two reporters named Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein, and they brought down a president, and maybe someday you can too. Right. I think this is still the aspiration of a lot of these guys, and that's why they can't resist this story. I think it explains the disproportionate coverage of all of this Get Trump stuff.
I've got half a minute, but so if this cultural divide helps Donald Trump because the elite media are on the other side of the divide, does it also limit him in keeping his support? Washington Post ABC poll out today, 37%. Does it both help him and hurt him?
Yeah, because if you keep getting hammered, even if people don't trust the people who are wielding the hammers, it makes a difference. The stuff gets in the air ducts, it gets in the airwaves, it gets everywhere, and people react. However, a couple of big accomplishments, like this tax reform and some other things, and I think when people really see this economy coming home to their pocketbook, as it seems to be going on the mega level, I think those numbers are going to go up. I think his future is numbers up. Yes, sir.
All right. Bill Bennett, great to talk to you. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks, Howard. My pleasure.
And coming up, a crisis for Netflix as allegations against Kevin Spacey threaten to topple the House of Cards franchise. And later, a really out-of-bounds attack on Laura Ingraham.